Welcome back to Deck Building with Bahumaut. This week we're going to investigate one of the old favourites, back from the first expansion of this game. Now, while one card in particular that was quite powerful in this deck has been removed as the gameplay has evolved, it doesn't impact the overall focus of the deck too much. As some of you may have experimented with earlier, there was quite a lot of fusion between the elf cards from the first expansion, which can gain quite a lot of power by working together and by basically creating a wave of elves that will swarm over your opponent or convert that into direct damage. So let's get underway. Obviously the majority of our cards are going to be in the green section. Now first off, we're going to examine the star participant of this deck, which allows you to deal direct damage and of course is a decent creature for 3 mana as well. So as you can see, he requires 2 types of mana, but only costs 3 for a 3/2, which is fairly neutral. But the most impressive thing about him is of course his ability. And since our deck is going to revolve around playing and creating large amounts of elves, that ability becomes extremely dangerous very quickly. So you should put all 3 of those within your deck. Now, synergizing extremely well with Shaman of the Pack from his damage supply is Lee Solana Huntmaster. So whenever you cast an elf spell, this generates an additional 1/1 elf token. And we can now have 4 within our deck, so those two become quite the synergistic core of a potential for victory. Another great addition, combining with multiple elves, is Dwynen. Plus she also has reach, which makes it a lot easier to deal with Thopters and other weaker flyers. Plus she powers up all other elves, and she gives you a nice heal if you can get a few elves out with a bit of support. So both of those should go in there. Now, with Dwynen, another card that gels quite well with her and Huntmaster is Dwynen's Elite, because you pay 2 mana for a 2/2 and also spawn an additional 1/1 elf token. So all 3 of those will work well in combination with this core. Another extremely useful one for us is Nissa, to give us more opportunities for lands and additional cards once she flips. Plus she's an elf as well, so she'll add to all those activated abilities and things. Definitely always useful to have another planeswalker on side. Every deck nowadays, especially with the release of the latest expansion, which included quite a large number of artifacts, it's a good idea to include the equivalent of a disenchant. And a great way to do that is with Reclamation Sage. Now we only want 2 of those, just in general. Of course you can add in, there have been several new green disenchants added in the latest expansion, so as in the equivalent of those, such as Appetite for the Unnatural, which you can use to supplement your amount of artifact removal and enchantment removal spells or abilities, if you expect to face that kind of deck. But for us, I think 2 is generally fine. And to speed up our deck, we should add in a few Elvish Visionaries, as basically it's just a 1/1 elf that allows you to draw an extra card. So, of course, you can also combine these weaker elves with Evolutionary Leap, which will allow you to search your deck for your next creature card by sacrificing one of your weaker tokens or elves such as Elvish Visionary once you've used its draw card ability. Can work very well to help speed up your deck. Now in the black section, we have another quite effective elf actually, very cheap as well. So 1/2 for 1 black mana is good in itself, but it also gains the ability to deal extra indirect damage as well. So definitely a nice lead in for any battle to have one of those on the field on the first turn. Another thing you'll always need when playing either online or locally is removal abilities, and a great way to do that is with Gilt-Leaf Winnower. Of course, as you can see, the second ability there will not target any other elf creature, but as long as you're not versing another elf deck, or your opponent hasn't stolen your creatures, you'll basically affect anything else. Plus, the creature also has, Winnower also has inherent menace, which can be quite useful. The only downside, of course, is its natural power of 4 makes it a big target for reprisal and things like that. So, even just for the removal ability, it is worth it to include it in your deck. And our final creature to add is Cultivator of Blades. So 5 mana for a 1/1, you think, wait, what? Then you read through the ability and you say, ah. So you can see it has the new Fabricate ability, which allows you to either create 2 1/1 server artifacts, or to put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. And its extra ability is whenever it attacks, all other attacking creatures you control gain +X/+X, where X is Cultivator of Blades power. So if you put those 2 counters on it, it will become 3/3, and of course we are also going to have spells within our deck to power up creatures. So that will then add to all your attacking creatures at the same time, which means this can make a whole attacking side extremely dangerous. Think of it as Stampede on steroids, for those who remember 7th edition. Now you could put in more than one. In the interest of keeping the mana cost balanced, I'm only going to put in the 1. Of course, you can put in more if you wish. This is going to be a creature heavy deck, as we already have 26 creatures within our deck. Now we'll add in a couple of the always useful Titanic Growths. Giving a creature suddenly +4/+4 can be a nasty shock. While it doesn't give your creature trample, it can be used to boost other abilities, protect a creature, or even combined with Cultivator of Blades to suddenly make everything even more scary. For those who like a more defensive deck, you can add in Pulse of Marasa to get your creatures back and give yourself life. For those who like a more offensive build, you might want to think about Wild Size, and in our case I'm going to be adding 2 of those in, because gaining trample and +2/+2 is nice, but also you gain the draw a card effect, which allows you to speed up your deck and cause more of an impact and maintain the speed of your assault. Reave Soul is definitely a nice cheap removal spell to include, but don't put in too many, as it can only target creatures with power 3 or less. So if your opponent is using heavy creatures, they're not really going to be much help for you to keep drawing. Of course, there's also the much simpler Murder. Costs 3 mana, just allows you to destroy a target creature. The only downside, of course, is the dual black mana cost. But seeing as most of the other removal spells later require 2 mana as well, as you can see, Unholy Hunger, Flesh to Dust, most of them require 2 black mana anyway, so it's a nice cheap removal spell. Another good one to add in a couple of is Wild Instinct, because it allows you to take care of flyers, plus also deal with any opponent who uses spells such as Sacrifice, plus also to deal with an opponent who has cards which force you to sacrifice an attacking creature, because Wild Instincts doesn't actually make you attack, it just deals, you just deal your damage to your opponent's creature without actually attacking. So I've actually seen white players get messed up by this before, because they play a card to force you to destroy an attacking creature you haven't actually attacked, so they waste their spell. And lastly, we'll be adding in a single Might of the Masses to flesh out our numbers. So, moving on to lands. And we're going to keep the lands pretty simple this week. So, we'll put in 4 Foul Orchards, pair of Woodland Cemeteries, ten forests, due to the imbalance, as you can see, of our green and black colors, and 7 swamps to round us up to 60. So as you can see there, we've got our deck complete, a large number of elves within it, and most of them using abilities that either revolve around elves or are powered up by additional elves being on the field. So let's have a look. So you can see that imbalance I mentioned before between black and green. So we've taken that into account by adjusting the amount of lands to skew towards green. You can see a smooth mana curve there. So we have quite a lot of 2 and 3 cost cards. So the majority of our deck has cheap and easy to play cards. And you can also see 26 creatures, so it's largely a creature focused deck with a little bit of support from spells that are either buffs or removal to deal with flying or powerful creatures that your elves can't get through any other way. Okay, so we've got everything constructed, and we'll have a quick look at our star ratings before going on to testing. So we can see here that we have a nicely balanced deck that also synergizes well within itself. So our speed is average, our strength is above average due to our large number of creatures, and we have sufficient control to deal with any unexpected threats. So as you can see, it's overall a fairly balanced deck that can deal with nearly any situation that comes our way. Okay, so let's see what we've got this week. Alright, so we've got our swamp, so we can lead with our archer. We have our 2 mana types, and a few support spells as well. So that's a fairly good opening hand. Of course, we don't have any of our more powerful late game spells or abilities yet, but hopefully we'll draw them by the time we reach the point we need them. So definitely get Thornbow Archer out first, because that continual little bit of damage, as well as his bonus damage, can contribute quite quickly to weakening an opponent. Okay, so since our opponent doesn't have any creatures out that can activate that artifact creature, we can safely play our elite to help get cards on the table and attack. Of course, once they have a creature who can be used to crew that vehicle, we can't just attack safely. But that's what we have our support abilities for, our support spells. Okay. And another black mana. Alright. So now we have a choice. We can attack and use our support, or wait and hope we get another forest. So what I'm going to do is attack with the 2-2, because I don't really mind if I lose it. That will prevent the 1-2 from blocking and force the 2-3 to block. Allowing me to use one of my supports to get rid of that. And I still have my 1-2 and 1-1 to block the 1-2 if it does attack. Of course, it could crew vehicle, provided they meet the power requirements. And since it's flying, there's nothing much I can really do about that. But they did summon it after the attack phase. Now, with vehicles, of course, unless you're using a disenchant or other artifact removal spell, they're only vulnerable to kill abilities, or destroy abilities, once they've actually been turned into creatures. So as you can see, whenever they're crewed. So generally it's a good idea, if you have instants that destroy a creature, to wait for it to be turned into an artifact creature first. And once again, we'll lead with our 2-2. And let's see. Now this gives us a choice. If they do decide to block, we can either use Titanic Growth or Murder. I think for general usefulness, we're going to go to Titanic Growth and leave our Murder for later, especially with our current mana composition. Okay, still getting a bit mana starved for green at the moment. Also got to be careful of Sage Lifecrafter's second ability, if our opponent gets that much life. But we'll wait for another turn and see what happens. Okay, at least it's one we can play, plus it also helps chip our opponent. And of course it has a higher attack value, attack power, so it's a little bit more threatening on the field than our 1-1s. Not much we can do about that. And finally we get our second green mana. In a situation like this, I generally prefer, so as you can see, I could have played Huntmaster or Cultivator of Blades. In a situation like this, I generally prefer to play the one that I'd rather, that is more disposable first. So that if they're going to remove it, I still have the second better one to cast. Because often, the Huntmaster is actually targeted because of its ability to spawn additional elves. But so is Cultivator of Blades also targeted because of its ability to power up all attacking creatures on your side. And of course, because of the secondary ability, I'd rather put two 1/1 counters on the creature. Good thing is that it's also underneath the threshold for reprisal. So it can't just be removed that way. So, things are about to get interesting. Now we have 2 murders in hand, which we can use strategically. And we can also take advantage of our Cultivator of Blades to make our attack much more dangerous. So, let's do that. So suddenly our little weaklings are a little bit more of a threat. Okay. Now, is anything in particular danger? Let's just double check. Okay, I don't think anything will be killed off there. So, there's no point wasting our murders on cards that won't kill any of ours. But as you can see, you have sufficient support cards and removal cards while not being overwhelmed with them. So you should be playing a creature nearly every turn, essentially. But you'll still draw the odd support or removal card to help you deal with problematic situations. So once again, we still have murders in hand, so we can buff everyone and attack again. And of course, if you had a support card that increased your Cultivator of Blades power, you could make all your creatures even more strong. Make all your creatures even stronger if I use correct grammar. So, how is that up versus battle? Anyway. So as you can see there's some of the effectiveness of this deck combined there. So as you saw, the ability to power up all your elves comes in quite handy. You also have a sufficient amount of support and removal to help you along. And there's quite a bit of generation of elf token generation and other effects in there. Of course, you can tweak it in whatever way you want. So you could consider adding in white to include things like Sunblade Elf, which is quite a nice cheap powered elf, but requires a plains mana to get the full benefit of it. Of course, you could also tilt your deck more towards removal, or more towards support, or of course stay balanced in the middle like it currently is, depending on if you're playing with an ally or playing solo. Now keep in mind, a deck of this level can actually survive online. You can win versus matches with this sort of deck online. And of course, tweaking it and personalizing it, you can find the build that suits you best online as well. But quite a lot of people have commented on using elf decks to reach the top tiers of online play. And this is a nice, simple base structure for you to use in order to create your own personalized elf deck for top tier play if you wish. And lastly, apologies if my voice is a bit garbled this week, because I've got a cold, so these things happen. Alright, so catch you next time on